once we're finished. So we should be able to see some sushi, and then we keep clicking more and it should show more. And when we click on a sushi, it should lower our total amount based on the cost, and we'll see an empty plate show up here, and it kind of empties the plate up there. So it's a lot of CSS stuff that makes that happen. It's really not going to be that complicated as far as the actual state management that we need to do. Let's see. First thing I want to do is make sure I can just get the original list of sushi from the server and just display them up at the top. So I'm gonna npm install. And npm run server. Gonna run it on 3001. And npm start. We'll start the app over here. And it's telling me the app is the parent to the sushi container and table. Sushi container is a parent to sushi and more button. So if I look at the app, it has sushi container in here. I go in there. We see the more button. We don't see any sushi components because this is where I should have all my sushi components that are displaying. Oops. So I'm gonna start off just hard coding so I don't have to do everything at once. So I'll start off by just grabbing one sushi and make sure I can get one showing up. And I'll just put that there. And then here, I'm gonna need to import sushi from /sushi. And then I'll render one sushi component. And I'm gonna pass it. Let's see. If I look at the component, it's not set up to do anything yet, really, with any props. So I could just save and we'll see it shows up kind of the skeleton of a sushi. But it needs to receive all these things as props. So I'm just gonna pass it the whole sushi. And then in here, I'll receive that. And then I'm just gonna destructure here, const name, image URL, price is probably all I really need here. No capital. Equals sushi. And then the image source will be the image URL. The alt will be the name. And then in the sushi details, this will be the name and this will be the price. So now we see the sushi actually shows up on the plate and we've got the name and the price. So I know I can get one sushi on the page. Now I'd rather be able to get all of them. So I'm going to go back here and just grab the array. And it's way too many. I'm just going to grab like 3 and go back to my sushi container and say sushis equals this array of 3 objects. And I can't do this anymore. So I'll say const menu equals sushis dot map, and then for each sushi, I can return one of these. And then I can just put my menu right here. So now I can see I've got the 3. And they each have their different names and prices and images showing up. So let me see. The list should only be showing 4 at a time. So I actually can work on that before I work on fetching more. If I just grab like 2 more, or if I'm lazy, I can just copy this one a couple more times, give them different IDs. That is one thing I'm missing here is whenever I map through them, if I look in the console, it's going to warn me that I didn't give them unique key props. So here I'll set the key equals sushi.id. So that error is gone. But now I'm showing 5 when I really only want to show 4 at a time. So this part, I just need to, let's say, just grab the first 4. So instead of sushis.map, I'll do sushis.slice. And then I need to say what the starting index is, and then what the ending index is of what part of the array that I want. So I want it from 0 to 4. So that'll give me just 4 won't be included, so it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3 elements from the array. So that's why we only see the 4 here. So it doesn't matter how many we put in this array, we'll still only see the first 4. I'll worry about how I can view more of them later. I want to first make sure I can get all of them and display the first 4. Then I'll worry about how I can display more than just the first 4. So instead of hard coding my sushis, I'm going to hit the use state hook. and say const sushis set sushis equals use state, and I'll start off with an empty array. So any questions so far on how I got to this point?
I don't think so. I think I was like jumping the gun with this one and just going straight to this part. So I think it was good to see the hard coding first.
Yeah, it's helpful to start that way, so then I at least know basically like if I was able to get all my sushis into my state, would it even show up on the page the right way? Because if I start the other way around, then sure, I can go fetch some sushi and then add it to my state and then try to put it on the page. But now I've done a whole bunch of work where I don't really know. I have a lot fewer points where I can actually be successful, like notice that I'm being successful. You don't really see anything until you do it all correct. But now we're not seeing anything currently because I haven't set up some stuff to put them in my state. But we did see some intermediate steps where we know what it looks like to be able to put some on the page, and we know we can render sushi properly as long as sushi is an actual array of sushi. And I could do one more step of hard coding too. Like in this use state, I could let's see. I'll grab this array. So in this, I could actually put my hard-coded arrays directly in there in my use state. And we'll see that it's initializing my state with those first 5. And then we're still mapping through them and or slicing it to get the first 4 and then mapping to display each. But I'll clear that out so my state starts out as empty. And now I want to fetch to get my sushi. So I'm going to need the use effect hook. So I'll call use effect and I'll pass it my 2 arguments. So a function and an array. And inside this function is where I'll fetch to http://localhost 3001/sushi with an S. And I'll get my response and parse the JSON from it. And then I'll get my sushis and I'll pass them into set sushis. And I could have also just said set sushis like this, and it would still call this function and pass the promised value in, which would be passing the sushis in. And so now we see them on the page again, and none of it's hard-coded. And if we check the components, we can look at the sushi container, and in our state, we can see there's 99 sushi objects in there, which is what we want, even though we're only displaying 4. So if we wanted to display different ones, we just need different indexes here. So like if this were 4, and this were 8, then we see a different set. Or 8 and 12. Then we should see a different set here. Hard to tell. Yeah, as soon as I save, we see them switch. So it should just be like a starting point that then goes up. So it should, I could basically say const start equals 0. And then here we'd put start, and then here we'd put start plus 4. And that's how we can see the first 4. But then basically, if as long as we keep upping this by 4, then we'd see the next 4, and then we'd see the next 4, and then the next 4, and so on. So instead of this being a const, we can make another piece of state. So we'll have const, it'll still be a const, but it'll be a state. So start and set start equals use state, and we'll start it at 0. And then whenever someone clicks more sushi, we can just increase set start by 4. So here maybe I'll put const show more. And whenever we want to show more, we'll say set start, takes start in as an argument, and then returns start plus 4. And then show more is what we would want to call anytime someone clicked this button. So we can say show more. And then in our more button, we'll destructure our props and get the show more prop. And then on click, show more. So now I can keep clicking this and it'll keep showing us the next 4. Until we reach the end. And now it's just too high of an index, so it doesn't show anymore. But I believe the README says that we don't need to worry about when it gets to the end. So we can just leave it be. So does anyone have questions about how I have done that part? Cool. The only tricky part about this so far, in my opinion, as far as just like the way this differs from just kind of the standard scenario, is the idea of trying to only display a few at a time. And so that part is just handled by right before we map, just slicing. And then we've determined that we always want 4 at a time. So this will always be 4 more than this. But the start will always start at 0 and then just go up every time we click to just keep going 4 more. You may see this +4 being referred to as something called a magic number, which is usually something you want to avoid in programming. A lot of times it just means that you're kind of choosing a number that seems arbitrary, and then it may show up a few different places. And if someone was looking at this and didn't know exactly what you were trying to do, it would be hard to determine why you're doing +4. So you may see stuff like this where there's like a const, defined not even inside the component. That could just be like a um it's more like a configuration variable. So a lot of times this kind of thing would be, especially if it's just like you made a decision about how many you wanted to show and you're probably not going to change it. Then a lot of times those are written as like all caps. So we might say something like um, number to display. And a lot of times they have underscores instead of like camel case or title case or anything. Um, and we'd say that's 4. And we just use that number to display. And now it's a little more obvious when we see start plus, and then we see, okay, it's however many we're choosing to display. Same with this. And then if there's the other benefit, like, okay, if I change my mind and I want to display 5, I just change this one thing up here, and now I show 5 and I click more and it keeps going up by 5. Before I would have had to hunt down any place that had +4 and change it to 5. So just a minor improvement to do something like this, but not the biggest deal if I hadn't done it that way. I have like a spell checker, by the way. That's why I have these underlines. Sushi's is not really grammatically correct, but it's more convenient to write it that way to indicate I'm talking about more than one. Okay, let's see what it wants next. So when I click on a sushi and a plate, it should eat the sushi, causing it to be removed from its plate and an empty plate to appear on the table. So the plate here should look empty based on the GIF I was looking at, and then it should add an empty one to the table. Let's take a look at the sushi component, because I noticed when I was in here, it has this ternary that is just hard coded as false. If I changed it to be true, then we see they look like this. So instead of this being hard coded, it should have something keeping track of whether the sushi has been eaten or not. So for now, I could just give it some state. Maybe say is eaten. Or of course, this would be use state, but here I'd say like const is eaten, set is eaten equals use state false. And then here I'll say opposite of is eaten. And that does that, or I can do is eaten. That does this. Actually, I think probably is eaten should be I think these just need to be reversed. Not sure. If is eaten is false, then we see null is kind of what I would think. No, if is eaten is true, we would see null. Oh yeah, this is fine. This is fine. Because then if it was eaten, then we're empty. Yeah, okay. So that's good. So now when we click on one, it should flip that state. So on click, we'll say toggle eaten, and I can make a const toggle eaten, set is eaten, take is eaten, and then return the opposite of is eaten. There we go. That toggles. I don't know if it wants toggle. I think it might just want it to be click it and it sets it to false. So I could just do something like that. Except no, it would be true because we're clicking it to eat it. So now I keep clicking and it doesn't do anything because it's always just setting it to be eaten if I click it, which in this case I think is all I want. Doesn't say anything about uneating. That seems okay. The problem is it's not updating the table. An empty plate should appear on the table whenever I do that. So let's look at, in our app, it was rendering the table. So in the table, it's set up to receive a prop called plates. It has a default value as an empty array, but plates should be an array of something that's being passed down. So I should, in my app, be passing down like plates. So if I just do that, it's not going to do anything yet, but I know I'm going to need to pass some kind of array of something down to my table. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And it's mapping through them. And for each one, it's returning one of these divs. So let's just say like 1, 2, 3. We put anything in there, but we see just no matter what we put in there, like I could just put empty string, or I could even put like undefined, undefined, undefined. It's still an array with 3 things in it. So it's going to map and put an empty plate for each thing. So it's really just a matter of having an array of some length, and it will put an empty plate for each one. So anytime I eat something, it really should be adding one to that array, like adding some element. So the array was coming from, it was a prop and table, and app is what's actually passing the array down. So that means that the things like this array needs to have like things added to it. So it should start off empty, but then like go up. So that means the array should be state. So I'm gonna change this and maybe just say plates. And we're going to import the state and set up plates and set plates equals use state and make it an empty array to begin with. And again, I could just put some stuff in there. We'll see there's that many plates. So I should be adding something here every time I eat one. So set plates should be called anytime I click on one of these. And something has to be added. So I could add whatever I want as far as just getting plates to show up. But I probably should add something useful. So I'm gonna add maybe the price of the thing that I ate. So here, I'll make a function for it. So const add price. Should take a price in, and it'll call set plates. And that's gonna take set plates, or sorry, it's gonna take plates and return an array where we spread the existing plates and then the new price that we're adding. So really, we're calling it plates, but it's really a list of prices. Which I think should come in handy later. So I think that's what we need to know, is how much they cost when we were adding them. So I need this to happen whenever I click one. So I need to pass it down to my sushi container. And then sushi container will receive it. So I'll change this to destructuring and take the add price, I think is what I called it. Yeah. And whenever I'm rendering a sushi, I'll give it the add price. Prop. And then our sushi can receive add price. And now when we toggle eaten, I can also add price and pass in price. So now when I click, we see it not only removes it, knows that it's been eaten, but it's also adding the price. I think if I click again, it's going to keep trying to do that because it keeps setting is eaten to true, but it's still going to keep adding the price. So I think to prevent that, I just need to say if it hasn't been eaten yet, then I'll do these two things. Otherwise, I just do nothing. So now I keep clicking and it doesn't keep adding. And I can look in my state here and go up to app because that's where I put that array of prices. I see it's got 25 in there. So then I can click this and we see it updates and says 15. So if I go to more sushi, I'll click this one, we should see another 15. Click that one, we see 25. So that seems good. So I've at least got this working. Oops. And now, whenever it's eaten, it should automatically charge them. So I decided to budget, and then the amount of money that they have should go down based on the cost of the one they ate. So that means, let's see, I think inside table is where it had however much money was left. So I need some kind of variable that where I have like a set budget amount, and then based off of the prices that I'm keeping track that I'm passing in my plates, I could display the correct number here. So we'll just make a const budget amount equals 100, we'll say. And I just want to say um, I need the sum of all the prices in my array. So I think I can do math.sum. And I don't think you can pass an array in it like this, but I think you can spread it. Um, maybe not. Oh, there's no math.sum. That's annoying. JavaScript sum. We'll see if there's any. Okay, so you just use a reduce, and they have this example. So I'll just copy this. So we'll say const plates cost equals plates dot reduce. The way reduce works is it takes two arguments. One is a function, which is right here. Second argument is a starting value. So we're wanting to go up from 0, and then it goes through each element and it passes two things. It passes the element, and which is in this case a, and the partial sum, which is referring to whatever number we started with here. So we started with or no, I think I got that backwards. Partial sum is the actual element. A stands for accumulator, the accumulated value, which is what we started off as 0 here. So it's going to keep calling this function, and it's going to pass in an element, which is going to be one of the prices. And then it passes in a, which is starting at 0. But then it runs the function, and that becomes the new a. So with the first element, let's say it was 15. Then now 15 plus 0 is 15. So now a is 15. So it will run this again with the next element, but it's going to pass in like whatever price that is, and then 15. And then a just keeps going up until the very end, and then it just returns whatever a is. So you can look at JavaScript reduce in MDN as well to see more examples and to see a little more in-depth coverage of that. But all I'm trying to do is add up all the numbers. So I could have also just done something like let total equals 0, plates dot for each, and then for each plate, total plus equals plate. And now total would be all of them added up. Reduce is just the somewhat fancier way to do that. And I'm calling it plates cost instead of total. So however much we have remaining, we can say budget amount minus plates cost. Okay. So now we have 100 remaining. I'm going to go back to my sushi container and change this back to 4. And so if we get this $10 one, we see the empty plate here, it disappears from there. And we see this is 90. I do the 25. So it cuts it down to 65. We see this extra plate. So we should see it be 50 now. Cool. So we're going to run into a problem, which is we don't have anything preventing us from just continuing on even past our budget. So I think that's the last thing we have to fix. So in here, customers cannot eat any sushi that exceeds the amount of money remaining in their balance. So the way I've done this, it's going to be a little tricky to prevent, because basically we start doing stuff before we really know how it's going to affect our budget. Because as soon as I click a sushi, it's just immediately setting its eaten to true. So I really only want to do this if I'm allowed. And knowing if I'm allowed can be a little tricky, because I don't know if I'm allowed except for basically the only way I can know is if my plates cost would exceed my budget amount if I were to add that new cost. So we end up with some kind of weird I guess logic where it's hard to know whether I should be doing this, except for some state that's like over here, but they're not really related to each other in other ways. Like the table is not in the same sort of component hierarchy, where our table right now, it only even knows that you tried to eat a plate because the price was already added. But I don't even know if I should add the price. And the information to determine that is kind of already inside my table. So that means I probably have to move some stuff out where the budget amount maybe shouldn't be in here and should be up in my app. And if I do it that way, that means my table needs to know about it somehow. So I'll just put maybe I'll put remaining balance. That's all my table really needs to know. It's like how much money is left. So it can display it right here. So it's going to get remaining balance. And that means this can move up as well. I'm gonna go back up to my app. And I'm gonna set remaining balance equal to budget amount minus plates cost. And I'm gonna go ahead and just put these right up here. So I have my plates, I have whatever the cost of them is, and then I'm determining what the remaining balance is. And something's a little off. I think it's the remaining balance. It's plates cost. I think that would be 0. So we would do 100 minus 0. Not sure what's going on here. I'm going to console log plates cost. Okay, 0. And budget amount is 100. Okay, we're passing remaining balance. So we go to the table. Oh yeah, right here, remaining balance. There we go. So we're back. We haven't fixed anything, but our stuff is like in a little bit better of a place. Because now the same place that we decide, like, if we're adding a price, we could know now, like, whether we should add the price or not. Like, we shouldn't add the price if it would cause the remaining balance to be negative. So we'll say if budget amount is greater than price. No, if remaining balance is greater than the price. So if however much we currently have left is more than how much this costs, then we'll do that. And it's kind of broken because it's still seeming like we're adding it. We're not seeing more plates stack up though. It's just because this one thing of like changing the is eaten to true, we're still not depending on anything. Every time you click it, it's just setting that to false. Or sorry, setting it to true because is eaten was false, and now every time we click on one, it just sets it to true. So it's not adding the price and adding a plate, but it is setting is eaten to true, which we kind of want to avoid that too. So that's even trickier because basically whether we should do this or not is dependent on if we could have the remaining balance be greater than the price. So I think what I may prefer to do is instead of checking that here, I'll just pass the remaining balance down to the sushi container. And the sushi container will receive remaining balance. And then each sushi can receive the remaining balance prop. And then the sushi we can say if it's not eaten and remaining balance, which we need to receive as a prop, is greater than the price. So now we check if we have not already eaten the sushi and if we can afford the sushi, then we'll set it to true and we'll add the price to our list of prices. So now I hit this and I click and it just does nothing because we can't afford this one. And I think that's it for this. I think that's all I wanted. So there are alternative ways we could have organized our state. There are certain ways that you could keep track of is eaten or not in like a higher up place, which might, I think that's a little more complicated to do, but then this last deliverable would have been a little simpler to know like when we could afford one and when we couldn't. But I think I'm okay with how it's organized right now. Does anybody have any questions about any parts of this? Like why I moved anything around or how any of the deliverables are working? Yeah. Yeah, that's React is kind of where I first started doing that, and then I kind of transferred it over to start doing it in regular JavaScript. Uh, but yeah, I showed that to you guys first, so that makes sense. Like that you may not have seen how to sort of transfer that over to React. But yeah, that's exactly right. I I usually I don't know. I think it's more important to know how to adjust than it is to know where to put stuff in the first place, I think. Because, like, a lot of this stuff wasn't even here to begin with. I had been putting it in other components. Um, and it was the skill of knowing, like, oh, I'm going to need to use this here or there, and knowing, like, okay, I can lift it up to another component and then pass them down as props and stuff like that. Like, getting good at that kind of thing is more important than knowing like where to put it in the first place. But just as far as overall organization, I usually have all of my states up at the top in one place. And then I may have stuff that's derived from state underneath it. Um, and I may have stuff that uh, changes state underneath that, but I'm not always super consistent with the order. So in this case, like this is something that we figure out based on state. So based off of the plates, we know what the total cost is by adding them all up. So I'm storing that down here. And then this was just figuring out based off of however much they cost and however much we had is however much we have left. And so I like to put them close together because these are all kind of related to each other. Same with add price, like the whole purpose of this function was to update, to call set plates and update our plates. So really like all of these consts kind of go together. They're all pretty highly related to each other. If I had another piece of state that I was keeping track of here, then I may put it up here with this one because I usually like to have all my states in one spot. But it kind of depends because like since these all relate to this state, if I was dealing with another state, I might just put my other state right here. And then anything related directly to that state, I'd kind of keep along with it. But you can also write comments and stuff where this would just be like state plates keeps track of prices of eaten sushi. And then just like adds up prices of eaten sushi. Calculates how much money is left. Adds a price to plates state. And then we can kind of just at a glance know what the purpose of these are. So that could be helpful too. Yeah. Plus, like the more you get used to it, the less you may need it, but it's still be a helpful step to take. And then like sometimes you may want to just leave it on because sometimes regardless of how used to it you are, there could be certain things that are like if a function is really long, sometimes the name of it is good enough to know basically what it's going to do, but sometimes it's still may be helpful to have a comment that kind of explains what the function's for. Um, Trying to think if there's anything else. I think if I were designing this for real, I would probably do it a little differently. Where here I probably would do something like eaten IDs and set eaten IDs. And then whenever I eat one, I would add an ID, or maybe add eaten ID. And this takes in an ID. This takes in IDs, spreads the IDs, and then passes that ID. The difference here would be now in my sushi, when I click, instead of add price, hang on, I gotta change some prop names. So now this will be add eaten ID and add eaten ID. And then the sushi container would receive add eaten ID. And then the individual sushi would get add eaten ID. It's going to be difficult to see why I'm doing this right at first, but I think it'll make sense once I go a little further. So then I go into here and I take add eaten ID as a prop. And I call that. And I pass the ID. So I need to pull that out of my sushi. There we go. Plates and set plates and all that, it's not defined anymore. So I go back here and table is now going to get eaten IDs instead. And then in table, I get eaten IDs and loop through those here. This would be the comment this out for now. And then remaining balance, just do that for now. Set plates not defined. App.js, where am I doing set plates? Oh yeah, add eaten ID. So this would be set eaten IDs. There we go. Okay. So the difference here is now when I click to eat them, if we look at our components and look at our app state, it's not keeping track of IDs of which ones I ate. Which if I have the IDs of the ones I ate, then you can use the IDs to get the actual sushi info. So I'd probably do that by moving my sushi state up out of my container. And into my app. I can grab this, move it there, and then get use effect. And then I just pass my sushis down to my sushi container. Then I go to my container and I receive them. Whoops. So we still see the sushi show up and all that. But it's nice because now if I have the IDs and I have the sushis both living in my app, then my eaten sushis could be a const that I create. So I can say like const eaten sushis, and then I could go through all my sushi and then filter based on which ones have IDs in my eaten IDs. Or I could go the other way around and say I'll map through my eaten IDs and for each one find which sushi it actually is. Doesn't really matter which way I go. I think it may be slightly more efficient usually to filter my sushis, but it kind of depends. But either way is fine. So I'll probably just say sushis dot filter, and then for each one, I'll check if I'll return sushi dot ID. I basically want to say this ID is included in this array. So I think I could say eaten IDs dot includes sushi dot ID. And I'll console log eaten sushis and see if that works. I go to my console. Cool. So now I click these three, go in here, we see these three sushis that I've eaten. So that's kind of nice because now I'm not only know like I have like a succinct list of each sushi that I've eaten based off of eaten IDs. But based off of this combined with this, I can figure out what are the actual sushi objects for which ones I've eaten. So now I know all the information about every sushi that I've eaten. Instead of before, I was just keeping track of prices, but it wasn't really in relation to anything else. It was just a list of prices. And once I had that list of prices, I didn't really know where those prices came from. I couldn't trace it back to like which sushi was which price and all that. Now I know exactly which sushis I ate and in which order I ate them. Um, yeah, that could help. And then there's some other stuff too. So actually, I do want to flip this though, because I just realized this is going to order them based off of what order the sushis were. If I want them ordered by the ones I ate, then I would need to go and say eaten IDs dot map, and then for each eaten ID, I want to return sushis dot find, and then for each sushi, I'd say this sushi dot ID matches the eaten ID, and I can still log eat sushis, and I still see them show up in here, but now they show up in the actual order that I ate them, whereas I think before they were showing up as the order of just if you went from the start of sushis to the end and checked like which ones were eaten. So it can matter whether I map from the eaten IDs or if I filter from my sushis. It just depends on if I want the order to be in the order that I ate or in the order that they started in. But in any case, this allows me to do some other things too, where now it's probably easier to determine if I can actually eat a sushi. And I can also get rid of some state lower down where like if I know my eaten IDs, then I could pass my eaten IDs down to my container. Say eaten IDs. Will just be my eaten IDs. And then in my sushi container, I can receive eaten IDs. And then when it's displaying a sushi, then I could just pass eaten IDs down, or I could pass like I could say is eaten equals eaten IDs dot contain or dot includes sushi dot ID. So now this will be true or false depending on whether this sushi should has already been eaten or not. So then the sushi can just get the is eaten prop, and I no longer need this state. And when I toggle eaten, or maybe I'll change this to just eat. So when I click, I'll try and eat. But now I just check if is eaten and remaining balance, but I'm not checking local state anymore. I'm checking this prop. And so I don't need to set his eaten ID. I just add the eaten ID. And that would already determine whether it shows up or not. Because now like whether this shows up or not is determined by this prop, which came from the parent, which just checked if its ID was in my eaten IDs, which comes from the app, which just keeps track of which sushis I've eaten or which I haven't eaten. So every time I try to eat one, it adds to this, or otherwise it won't be in this list. I've broken some stuff because I never came back and fixed the budget stuff. So budget stuff works a little differently if I do it this way. Where now eaten sushis gives me a list of sushis that I've eaten. So if I want to add up the prices, now I need to find the prices by doing like its cost. It's pretty similar, but instead of just adding up the array, because the array is now of like sushi objects. If I change this to like eaten sushis, partial sum is really going to be a sushi. So I really want to add the sushi dot price plus a. So now the plates cost will be the actual cost. So then I can change this to plates cost. And then remaining balance is being passed down. Okay, so it's a little off. Changing it to not a number means the something's wrong with my reduce. I may have done this in a weird way. Let's see if look at the end reduce. And I did get it backwards, actually. I had it right the first time. So here we'll just say is like total. And then this will be the sushi. And so we're gonna keep doing sushi dot price plus total, which starts at 0. There we go. Okay. So now we see this works again. But it's nicer because if I do it this way, like I mentioned, I'll have a way to track here's all the ones I ate and which order I ate them. So if I needed to know more than just their prices for any reason, then I would know. And that means that I also already know ahead of time whether the sushi should be um, showing up on the plate or not. So when I'm rendering the sushi, I just can hand it a prop that's true or false based on whether it should show up or not. So then if it is already eaten, then it displays null. And when I click, it also doesn't bother doing this. I could also try to do something like this, where if it's not eaten, I can just try and add without even caring about the remaining balance. I'm not really setting any state here, so I don't need to know as much like if this worked. So I can just try and do this, and then the add eaten ID could be responsible for only doing it if budget amount is or if remaining balance is greater than the price of the one we're eating. So here I could just put price and put price. And now when I call it from here, I'll pass the ID and the price. So now when I try to eat, it'll check if it's already eaten. And then it'll try and add it if it hasn't been eaten. And it'll say, here's the one it's trying to eat. Here's how much it costs. Then our app takes those in and checks, do we have enough left over to afford that one? If so, then add it. Otherwise, do nothing. And we'll see if that still works. Yeah. So it kind of simplifies things a bit. We don't have to pass the remaining balance down to our sushi container anymore. Sushi container can get rid of that. And it can stop passing it down to the sushi. And the sushi already took it out of here. And it doesn't need state anymore. And I could probably even just say like, don't even check if it's eaten. And then just go ahead and try and eat it. And I could go back up here and say if eaten IDs dot includes ID, but make it the opposite. So only if it doesn't already include it. And the remaining balance is greater than the price, then do that. And now it's stopping me from double eating still. But now we don't even have to check anything here. But I kind of like checking if it was eaten here because this is a little easier to check. It's just already calculated down to like just being a Boolean. So we already know if we've eaten it or not. Which means if we only ever call this, if we know we haven't eaten it, then we don't have to check that part of the condition. So I think this is a little better. But as long as we understand like the logic and what's being checked first, because like this is going to be called So we check first if we've already eaten it. Then we know that we don't have to check in here. But in here, we still need to check if we can afford it. So you can kind of move stuff around and say, pass enough information down here so that we know whether we can afford it already. And we don't need to check inside here. Or we could say, our sushi doesn't really know whether we could afford it or not. So it's just going to try. And it's up here where we can tell if we can afford it. So whatever requires like the least amount of work or the least amount of like passing props everywhere is usually best. But this particular lab is a little tricky as far as just knowing where to store state and as far as like moving state around and passing props around. It's a little more complicated than most. The code challenges won't require quite as much, I don't know, irregular state management. But if you have other questions, let me know. If there's other labs you want to see, or you want me to go over anything else, then I'm happy to.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. There's one more resource, by the way, that may be helpful. It's basically all the same material, but presented in a little different way. It's a free course on egghead.io. I think you have to sign up to get an account, but the course and like setting up an account is free and the course is free. They do a bunch of paid courses that, from what I've seen, they tend to be pretty high quality. They get really good people to do them that are like professionals in the industry. But some of them will put some of their courses on here for free. So this one is a pretty well-known one that walks through all the fundamentals of React in like short, like 1 to 5 minute videos over a bunch of different concepts.
Manage state with hooks. There it is. That's what we need.
Cool.
Cool. Thank
Yeah,
you.
check that out, see if it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at this tonight. Alrighty.